In the middle of the Colorado desert, surrounded by razor wire and silence, there's a place where time stops. A fortress carved from concrete and fear, built to cage the men America fears most. Here, conversations happen through steel. Dreams fade into madness. And even the strongest minds break. Welcome to ADX Florence, the Alcatraz of the Rockies. Before we begin, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe. Your support helps us bring you more real stories from behind the world's most secure walls. The story of ADX Florence begins in the shadow of chaos, a time when the U.S. federal prison system was cracking under pressure. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, violence inside American penitentiaries reached record highs. Attacks on correctional officers, prison riots, gang wars spilling through cell blocks like wildfire. Even the most secure federal prisons, like Marion in Illinois, had become war zones. Marion was once the toughest prison in America. After the closure of Alcatraz in 1963, it became the nation's new Supermax. But by 1983, Marion was in flames, not literally but metaphorically. 2 correctional officers were murdered by members of the Aryan Brotherhood in coordinated attacks just hours apart. In response, the entire facility went on permanent lockdown. Inmates were confined to their cells 23 hours a day, an experiment that would later inspire the design of something far more extreme. By 1989, the Bureau of Prisons had seen enough. They needed a place where control was absolute, where escape was impossible, and where the most dangerous inmates could be buried alive in silence. That's when plans began for the United States Penitentiary, Administrative Maximum Facility, or simply ADX Florence. The site chosen was remote, a patch of desert land near the small town of Florence, Colorado, about 2 hours south of Denver. It wasn't just a strategic choice, it was psychological. Far from any major city, surrounded by barren fields and mountain ranges, ADX was meant to feel like isolation itself. A modern tomb built to erase the chaos of the outside world. Construction began in 1990. Costing nearly $60 million at the time, the design pushed every known boundary of prison architecture. Each cell, a 7 by 12-foot concrete box, was engineered to eliminate risk, contact, and even hope. The walls were reinforced to absorb sound. The doors were controlled by motion sensors. And the windows were so narrow that inmates couldn't even tell where in the world they were, just a sliver of sky, a glimpse of light, and nothing more. When ADX officially opened in 1994, it was hailed as the end of violence. Federal officials claimed it would make the system safer by isolating the most uncontrollable inmates. But even in those first few years, some insiders knew this wasn't just a prison. It was a machine built to dismantle the human mind. They called it clean version of hell. No bars, no open yards, no voices. Only concrete, cameras, and control. Every movement inside ADX is calculated. Prisoners live inside their cells 23 hours a day. They eat through slots in their steel doors, exercise alone in tiny concrete pens, and communicate only through intercoms. Their 1 hour of recreation takes place in what inmates call the dog runs. Small cages surrounded by high walls and barbed wire. No open sky. No horizon. Just isolation within isolation. But what truly defines ADX isn't its walls, it's the men inside them. From terrorists like Zacarias Moussaoui, the so-called 20th hijacker of 9/11, to drug lords like El Chapo Guzman, who once tunneled out of Mexico's most secure prison, to domestic extremists, spies, and serial killers, ADX holds them all. Each one a story of violence, betrayal, and control. Even among prisoners, ADX is feared. It's where the system sends those it cannot rehabilitate, the ones too violent, too influential, or too infamous for anywhere else. Some arrive already broken. Others break slowly. What happens to a man when every day looks the same, when he can't touch another human being, can't see the world beyond his concrete walls, can't even hear his own footsteps echo back? Psychologists have called it the slow erasure of self. Inside ADX, inmates don't just lose their freedom. They lose their sense of being human. By the late 1990s, journalists began calling it the Alcatraz of the Rockies. But unlike the original Alcatraz, this one was silent. No shouts, no clang of metal doors. Just a low mechanical hum, and the constant watching eye of cameras and motion sensors. Even the guards who work there describe it as eerie. They say it's like walking through a ghost town made of concrete and electricity. Every sound echoes differently, every light feels artificial. For the inmates, that artificial world becomes their only reality. Some prisoners last years. Others decades. But the walls of ADX never change, and that's what makes it terrifying. In the next chapter we'll step inside, to see how life actually functions inside the most secure prison in the United States, and what the daily routine looks like for the men who will never taste freedom again. Step inside ADX Florence, and you enter a world stripped of sound, color, and human touch. Every corridor looks the same: gray concrete, polished floors, and thick metal doors marked only by numbers. There's no shouting, no chaos, just the hum of ventilation and the faint buzz of fluorescent lights. For the inmates inside, this is their entire universe, a 7 by 12-foot cell built to erase every trace of freedom. Each cell is a sealed capsule, a concrete bed, a fixed desk molded into the wall, a stainless steel toilet and sink, one unit, one function. The door is solid steel with a narrow slot, used for food trays, handcuffs, and little else. Even the window, 4 inches wide, 2 feet long, is angled upward so the prisoner can see only the sky, never the horizon. It's a design that removes the concept of direction. No east, no west, no escape. Only up. Every morning at ADX begins the same way. Lights flicker on at 6 a.m. A correctional officer slides a breakfast tray through the slot. Powdered eggs, toast, milk. The officer doesn't linger. No words are exchanged. The door closes again and silence takes over. Meals arrive 3 times a day. No dining halls, no shared tables, no conversation. Every meal is eaten alone, under cameras, behind steel. The trays are collected within minutes. No metal utensils, no glass, no objects that could be turned into a weapon or a tool for escape. Every movement is controlled, even bathroom breaks, because the toilet flushes automatically on a time system to prevent misuse. At 8 a.m., guards conduct the first head count of the day. They look through the small, reinforced window in each door, never opening it unless necessary. Then come the inspections. Walls, vents, sinks, even light fixtures are checked for tampering. At ADX, trust doesn't exist, only procedure. From there, the hours stretch into nothingness. Inmates read, write, or stare at the wall. Some do push-ups or pace from one end of the cell to the other, counting steps again and again to keep their sanity. Books and newspapers are delivered once a week, carefully screened. TVs are allowed but heavily restricted, limited to educational and religious programming. Entertainment here is a privilege that can vanish at any time. The only time inmates leave their cell is for recreation. 1 hour per day alone in a small concrete pen known among prisoners as the dog run. It's roughly the size of a walk-in closet, surrounded by 20-foot-high walls and a metal grate overhead. Some cells in newer units have enclosed outdoor cages instead, where inmates can see a patch of blue sky through mesh wire. But freedom it is not. Many describe it as walking in a concrete coffin. Before an inmate leaves his cell, he's handcuffed, shackled at the ankles, and escorted by 2 or more guards. He walks bent forward slightly, hands in front, chains rattling with every step. If he needs to visit the medical unit, shower, or attorney room, the process repeats. No unescorted movement ever occurs. Not once. Showers happen 3 times a week. Each shower stall is made of steel and plexiglass. The inmate is locked inside and monitored from outside. Even soap is rationed. For some, this routine becomes more punishment than hygiene. The act of showering is just another scheduled reminder of control. And yet, even in this engineered silence, communication finds a way. Inmates have learned to tap on walls, speak through vents, or use mirrors to signal each other. A simple tap code, 1 tap for A, 2 for B, and so on, becomes a lifeline. Human connection reduced to echoes through concrete. Psychologists who've studied life inside ADX say the isolation has measurable effects. Hallucinations, insomnia, severe anxiety. Many prisoners develop hypersensitivity to noise. Even the faint hum of the ventilation system can drive them to anger or despair. One former inmate described it as being buried alive with your eyes open. The Bureau of Prisons insists the system works, that ADX protects both staff and inmates by separating the uncontrollable from the manageable. They call it a place of necessary control. But critics, including the American Civil Liberties Union, call it something else, a monument to psychological torture. In 2015, the ACLU's National Prison Project described ADX as a clean version of hell, echoing the very phrase used by its own guards decades earlier. Over the years, lawsuits have forced some changes. Inmates with diagnosed mental illnesses are no longer supposed to be housed there, after a 2012 settlement in Bacote versus Federal Bureau of Prisons, which exposed extreme cases of neglect. One inmate, Von Dorch, reportedly suffered severe burns during a forced bath at another Supermax before being transferred to ADX. His story, and many others, fueled growing debate about how far America is willing to go in the name of security. Still, ADX remains fully operational. With a population of roughly 400, it holds some of the world's most notorious criminals. For some, it's a final stop before death. For others, it's a slow descent into silence. But to truly understand ADX, we need to look beyond its routine, to the minds of the men inside. In the next chapter, we'll meet the infamous inmates who've called ADX home, and explore what happens when power, ego, and violence collide inside the most secure prison in America. Every prison has its legends, men whispered about in cell blocks, names that echo through bars and concrete. But at ADX Florence, the legends live behind soundproof doors. They are not the average inmate. They are bombers, assassins, cartel kings, and killers whose stories shook the nation. Men whose crimes rewrote laws, redefined security, and left scars that still linger. Here, every name carries a story of chaos, and a lifetime of silence. The Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski. For years, Ted Kaczynski waged war against technology. From a remote Montana cabin, he mailed bombs to universities, airlines, and researchers, killing 3 people and injuring 23. His manifesto, Industrial Society and Its Future, was a chilling warning about technology's control over human life. When he was captured in 1996, the world met a man both brilliant and broken, a Harvard graduate turned hermit. He was sent to ADX Florence in 1998. There, his life became a paradox. The man who hated machines was confined in a cell monitored by them. He spent his final years reading, writing letters, and watching time evaporate through that narrow slit of sky. In 2023, Kaczynski was found dead in his cell, a quiet end for a man who once terrified America through silence. Ramzi Youssef, the original World Trade Center bomber. Long before September 11, there was 1993. A massive truck bomb detonated beneath the North Tower of the World Trade Center, killing 6 and injuring over 1,000. The man behind it, Ramzi Youssef, fled the country but was captured in Pakistan 2 years later. At ADX, he is said to spend 23 hours a day alone, writing long letters filled with ideology and defiance. He once told guards, "You can lock me up forever, but you can't stop the war." Those words still hang in the air of his cell, preserved like an echo of the past. Zacarias Moussaoui, the so-called 20th hijacker. Moussaoui's name became infamous after September 11. Prosecutors claimed he trained with Al-Qaeda and planned to join the hijackers, but was arrested weeks before the attacks. His behavior in court was erratic, shouting at judges, firing lawyers, and calling himself a warrior. When sentenced to life without parole, he laughed. Now he spends that life in silence at ADX Florence. No cameras. No crowds. Just concrete and time. For a man who once sought martyrdom, this quiet eternity may be the harshest punishment of all. Richard Reed, the shoe bomber. Reed tried to blow up an American Airlines flight in 2001 using explosives hidden in his shoes. When passengers stopped him mid-flight, his fate was sealed. Today he walks no further than 10 paces in any direction. His cell, like every other, is engineered for safety. No loose wires, no cloth long enough to form a rope, no metal that could be reshaped into defiance. He prays, reads the Quran and waits, hour after hour, in the quiet hum of isolation. Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, the Boston Marathon bomber. Tsarnaev's story is more recent. A 19-year-old student whose actions on April 15, 2013, stunned the world. 3 people killed. Over 260 injured. After a dramatic manhunt, he was captured, tried, and sentenced to death. Though his legal appeals continue, his confinement at ADX remains a reminder that even youth doesn't shield from consequence. Here there are no interviews. No sympathy. Only the endless rhythm of days that never change. El Chapo Joaquin Guzman Lora. The man who once controlled the world's most powerful drug cartel now spends his days in near-total isolation. El Chapo, the Mexican drug lord famous for spectacular escapes, through tunnels, bribes, and corruption, finally met a place he couldn't break. When he arrived at ADX in 2019, even the guards seemed tense. Every door, every lock, every corridor was double-checked. Because if anyone could test the system, it was him. But here no one escapes. Not through tunnels. Not through influence. ADX is immune to charisma. Sources close to the Bureau of Prisons say El Chapo's cell was reinforced with additional layers of security. More sensors, tighter surveillance, limited contact. For a man who once commanded armies, the silence is louder than bullets. Robert Hansen, the FBI mole. Perhaps one of the strangest inmates to ever live behind those walls was Robert Hansen, a veteran FBI agent who spied for the Soviet Union and Russia for over 20 years. He sold classified secrets that compromised U.S. intelligence operations and agents worldwide. When he was caught in 2001, even his colleagues couldn't believe it. At ADX, Hansen lived a quiet, devout life. He attended Mass through the prison's broadcast channel, read religious texts and rarely spoke. He died in 2023, found lifeless in his cell, another ghost added to the long silence of Florence. Together, these men form a gallery of infamy, terrorists, traitors, assassins and masterminds whose names once filled headlines. Now their voices echo only in memory. But ADX Florence isn't just about who's inside. It's about what happens to them, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, once they're sealed away. Behind every locked door is a slow transformation. Power fades, pride erodes, and time devours everything. Some inmates start talking to themselves. Others create imaginary companions. And a few, the strongest, learn to survive the silence by turning inward, building entire worlds in their minds. Psychiatrists who have interviewed former ADX inmates describe a pattern called SHU syndrome, named after the special housing units where isolation is most extreme. Symptoms include paranoia, hallucinations, and the gradual loss of emotional response. In simple terms, they stop feeling human. That's the invisible punishment of ADX. It doesn't break bones, it breaks identities. But among all the men ever sent there, a few found ways to fight back, legally, spiritually, or psychologically. Their stories reveal both defiance and despair. In the next chapter, we'll explore those human cracks in the concrete. The lawsuits, the hunger strikes, and the secret communications that exposed what life inside ADX truly does to the mind. From the outside, ADX Florence looks invincible, 37 acres of concrete, fences, and armed towers standing like a monument to control. But inside those walls, something else was brewing. A quiet rebellion, not of fists or weapons, but of words, lawsuits, and human desperation. The seeds of defiance. By the early 2000s, whispers about life inside ADX had begun to leak. Former inmates and retired guards spoke of men losing their minds in silence, banging their heads against walls, screaming through vents, or refusing to leave their cells. Letters smuggled out told stories of hallucinations, paranoia, and self-harm. Some inmates cut themselves just to feel something real. Others smeared messages on the walls, written in blood. It was around this time that a small group of lawyers, psychologists, and journalists started asking questions. One of them was attorney Edward Arrow, who would later play a pivotal role in exposing ADX to the world. He described the place not as a prison, but as a living laboratory of isolation, where the line between discipline and cruelty blurred beyond recognition. When Arrow and his team filed lawsuits on behalf of several inmates, they didn't just challenge individual treatment, they questioned the very foundation of the Supermax system. The Bacote case, madness behind concrete. In 2012, the lawsuit Bacote versus Federal Bureau of Prisons was filed in federal court. It represented inmates suffering from severe mental illness who were locked in ADX without proper care. The complaint painted a disturbing picture. Prisoners screaming all night, mutilating themselves, smearing feces, and begging for help that never came. One inmate, Bacote himself, reportedly believed the walls were whispering to him. Another described seeing figures crawling out of the floor. And when they sought medical attention, they were told to calm down, or punished for causing disruption. The lawsuit accused the Bureau of Prisons of violating the Eighth Amendment, the constitutional protection against cruel and unusual punishment. After years of legal battle, the case led to a historic settlement in 2015. The Bureau agreed to transfer mentally ill inmates to specialized treatment facilities and improve psychiatric oversight at ADX. It was one of the few times the fortress had been forced to change from within. The hunger strikes. Legal battles weren't the only form of resistance. Several inmates resorted to hunger strikes, the only weapon left when every other freedom is stripped away. In 2011 and 2013, reports surfaced of coordinated strikes inside the prison. Prisoners refused food for weeks, demanding access to medical care, better communication, and, most of all, relief from total isolation. Officials downplayed the protests, but internal memos revealed concern about the growing unrest. One striking inmate wrote, "They can control my body but not my will. Each day I refuse food, I take something back." His words, like many others, never reached the public, until advocacy groups obtained redacted letters years later. The invisible wounds. Doctors who reviewed the medical records of ADX prisoners described what they found as psychological erosion. Unlike physical injuries, these wounds couldn't be photographed. They appeared in the slow collapse of personality, a mind unraveling cell by cell. Some inmates began to believe their cells were shrinking. Others became terrified of open spaces when they were finally transferred elsewhere. A few begged to return to ADX, unable to handle the noise and human contact of a normal prison. Isolation had become their identity. Dr. Terry Kupers, a psychiatrist specializing in correctional mental health, testified that long-term solitary confinement could cause irreversible cognitive damage, even after release. He called ADX the most extreme example of human disconnection ever designed by a government. The walls listen. Even the staff at ADX are not untouched. Former guards have described a unique form of stress, one that comes from working in constant quiet, surrounded by danger but hearing almost nothing. Some compared it to guarding ghosts. Every movement is monitored, every door opened remotely, every conversation recorded. One retired officer admitted, after a while you stop seeing them as men. They become file numbers. That's how you survive the job. That emotional detachment, both for officers and inmates, is what keeps the system running. The architecture of control depends not only on concrete but on dehumanization. Once empathy disappears, the machine runs smoothly. A crack in the concrete. Despite all of this, ADX remains operational. But its myth of perfection has been cracked. Human rights organizations continue to push for reform, citing studies from the UN that define long-term solitary confinement, anything over 15 days, as a form of torture. At ADX, many men have spent years, even decades, in near-total solitude. In 2021, the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Torture called the U.S. Supermax system an affront to basic human dignity. Still nothing changed. The official stance from the Bureau of Prisons is firm. ADX is necessary for national security. And maybe, in a world of terrorism and organized crime, they're right. But the question remains, at what cost? Because behind every wall of ADX, there's a silent debate playing out. Can a nation built on freedom justify a place designed to erase it? In the next chapter, we'll step deeper into that question, exploring how ADX fits into America's larger prison philosophy, and whether the promise of safety has come at the expense of the human soul. Every civilization builds monuments to what it fears most. For some, it's famine. For others, invasion. For America, it's chaos. ADX Florence was never just a prison, it was a statement. A declaration that order could be engineered, that violence could be contained with enough concrete, enough cameras, and enough isolation. But history shows that control always comes with a price. When ADX opened in 1994, it represented the cutting edge of correctional science. The promise was simple: separate the most dangerous men from the rest and you protect both. The reality, however, proved far more complicated. For decades, America's prison system has balanced on a paradox: safety versus humanity. How do you protect society from those who destroy it, without destroying yourself in the process? ADX Florence sits at the center of that dilemma, a symbol of both technological triumph and moral unease. A machine for control. The design of ADX is a masterpiece of precision. Every wall, every door, every beam of light serves one purpose: to control. It's not chaos that rules here but algorithms and schedules. Doors open only when others close. Guards walk specific routes to prevent ambushes. Even the exercise cages are designed to reduce line of sight between inmates, preventing eye contact, conversation, or connection. This is control refined to a science. But control, like radiation, leaves invisible burns. Inside, men unravel not because of violence but because of silence. The constant hum of machines replaces the rhythm of human life. The air is filtered. The light is artificial. Day and night blend into one endless loop of sameness. Some inmates have spent over 20 years there, seeing nothing but walls. And when they're finally moved to lower security facilities, many can't function. They don't remember how to talk to people. They flinch at footsteps. They ask to go back. In trying to make America safer, ADX created a new kind of captivity, one that lingers even after release: the politics of fear. The Supermax model didn't stay in Florence. It spread, first to state prisons across the U.S., then to other countries. From California's Pelican Bay to Illinois' Tams, the idea of extreme isolation for extreme offenders became a blueprint. And yet, studies later revealed that these prisons did little to reduce violence long-term. They only buried it deeper, out of sight. Politicians called it tough on crime. Critics called it expensive cruelty. But in a nation still haunted by terrorism, gang wars and mass violence, the public rarely objected. Safety cells, even when it's built on solitude. The Bureau of Prisons defends ADX as essential. They argue that men like El Chapo, Ramzi Youssef, and Tsarnaev can't be housed anywhere else. And they're not wrong. Some of these inmates once ordered murders with a phone call or passed coded messages through attorneys. In a system that deals in lives, one mistake could cost hundreds. But still, the moral question hangs heavy. If you silence a man completely, mind, body, and soul, what's left of justice? The ghosts of ADX. Former inmates who've spoken out say the sound that haunts them most is the silence. The absence of voices. The echo of doors sliding shut forever. One ex-prisoner described how he started counting cracks in the ceiling just to measure time. Another said he kept his sanity by imagining the smell of rain, something he hadn't felt in 15 years. A third wrote a letter saying, "I forgot my own face. The mirror shows a stranger now." These aren't excuses for what they did. Many of these men committed unspeakable acts. But inside ADX, even the guilty become ghosts long before they die. The cost of perfection. From a security standpoint, ADX has succeeded completely. No inmate has ever escaped. No major riot has ever occurred. The system works flawlessly. But that perfection is the most terrifying part of all. In a world where everything is watched, every movement tracked, and every voice silenced, perfection begins to look a lot like oblivion. ADX isn't just a facility. It's a mirror, reflecting the darker side of a nation that values freedom yet builds cages to protect it. As the camera fades out, picture it. The sun setting over the Colorado Rockies, painting the desert in shades of orange and ash. Beneath that sky stands a fortress of concrete, built to last 100 years. Inside, 400 men sit in their cells, alone, unseen, unheard. Each one locked in a personal war between memory and madness. ADX Florence doesn't explode like a Hollywood story. It whispers. Its power lies not in violence but in the quiet certainty that once you enter, you never truly leave. The prison was built to protect America from its monsters. But somewhere inside those walls, it also protects America from seeing what punishment really looks like. Because here the system wins. Here, silence is the sentence. So the next time you hear about the Alcatraz of the Rockies, remember, it isn't just a place. It's a question. One the world still hasn't answered.